Have you ever noticed how a man can walk into a room and nobody says a word, but somehow everybody feels him? And another man can do everything right. Say the right things, buy the flowers, answer fast. Text good morning, be agreeable, be available, be generous, and still slowly watch the respect die? That is the part most men never understand. She did not stop respecting you because you were not perfect. She stopped respecting you because you became easy to move, easy to predict, easy to ignore, and too dependent on her reaction to feel steady in yourself. And once that happens, the relationship changes in ways most men feel before they can explain. The tone shifts. The eye contact changes. The replies get shorter. The warmth becomes conditional. The attraction starts acting like it needs maintenance. And the worst part is that the man usually feels it happening and reacts by seeking even more validation, which only makes it worse. If you are hearing this, and it stings a little, stay with me, because this is not about blaming women. This is about understanding what destroys respect in a man and what rebuilds it. This is about becoming the kind of man who does not need to beg for what should be naturally given. And before we go any further, subscribe right now if this is already hitting something deep in you. Do it politely, do it quietly, but do it now because this is the kind of truth most men learn too late. Think about the men you already know who get respected without trying so hard. It is not always the richest man in the room. It is not always the most attractive man. It is usually the one who has his own center. The man who can hear criticism without collapsing. The man who can love without chasing. The man who can walk away without making a speech. The man who has enough self-respect that nobody gets to hand him his identity like a receipt. That is why some men lose women, jobs, friendships, and even their own confidence at the same time. Because the real issue was never just the relationship. The real issue was that they had built their entire emotional structure on external approval. And external approval is the most unstable foundation you can ever build on. A man who needs constant reassurance becomes easy to manipulate. A man who needs constant praise becomes easy to discourage. A man who needs a woman to confirm his value will slowly start behaving like a boy trying to pass a test instead of a man living his life. Here is the hidden truth nobody tells young men early enough. The moment you begin asking someone else to validate what you have not built inside yourself, you hand them authority over your peace. That is a dangerous trade. Look at real life. Think about Kanye West, before all the chaos and noise. For years, he operated like a man obsessed with being seen, praised, respected, and understood on his own terms. That kind of hunger can create greatness, but it can also create instability if it is not grounded. Or look at public figures like Tiger Woods in the period where his confidence was tied up in performance, image, and control. When the center is external, every mistake feels like a collapse. Every criticism feels personal. Every loss feels like identity loss. That same pattern plays out in ordinary men every day, just in quieter ways. The man who needs validation from a woman, from social media, from his friends, from his family, from his boss, from every room he enters, becomes a man who can be emotionally controlled by anybody who notices the weakness. And women feel that. They may not explain it the way a coach or a writer explains it, but they feel it instantly. Neediness changes the air. A woman may still like your attention, still enjoy your company, still appreciate your effort, but respect begins to leak out of the relationship the moment she senses that your internal state depends on her responses. That is why the same compliment from one man feels attractive and from another man feels heavy. The first man is sharing himself. The second man is asking to be rescued. Robert Greene writes a lot about power, confidence, and the way neediness destroys presence. In his work, especially when he talks about mastery and social dynamics, the pattern is always the same. The person who is not anchored becomes predictable, and predictability kills power. Ryan Holiday says something similar in a different language when he talks about ego and self-mastery. The more a man tries to protect his image, the more fragile he becomes. The more he needs approval, the less free he is. The less free he is, the less respect he commands. That is not theory. That is life. A man sends 10 texts and then wonders why she pulled away. He double texts because he is anxious. He apologizes for things that are not his fault because he wants peace. He over-explains because he wants to be understood. He says yes when he wants to say no because he fears being disliked. He gives, hoping that effort will turn into desire. But effort without self-respect is not attractive. It is just pressure. And pressure is the enemy of respect. I want you to imagine something real. A man I knew in his late 20s, let's call him Daniel, was dating a woman he genuinely liked. In the beginning, he was relaxed. He had his own routine, his gym sessions, his work, his friends. She texted first sometimes. She smiled when she saw him. She respected his space. Then he started falling into the trap. He began asking her what she thought of his outfits. He wanted reassurance after every date. He became upset if she did not reply quickly. He asked if she still liked him in ways that made the relationship feel like a performance review. And slowly, almost invisibly, the energy changed. She did not leave because he was bad. She lost respect because he became emotionally unreliable. She felt like she had to manage his feelings. She could no longer lean into him. He was no longer a man with a life. He was a man waiting on a verdict. That is what validation seeking does. It turns your value into a question mark. And the brutal truth is this: a woman cannot deeply respect a man who does not respect his own boundaries, his own time, his own standards, and his own word. Respect is not built by how much you do for someone. It is built by how clearly you know who you are when nobody is clapping. A lot of men think validation seeking is just being nice. It is not. Nice is not the problem. Warmth is not the problem. Kindness is not the problem. The problem is when kindness is secretly a strategy to avoid rejection. The problem is when generosity is a transaction. The problem is when the man is not giving from fullness, but from fear. A woman can feel fear disguised as sweetness. She can feel when your compliment is actually a request. She can feel when your generosity is actually a leash. She can feel when your patience is actually desperation, wearing a clean shirt. And when she feels it, she may not say it out loud, but the respect begins to break. That is why so many men end up in the humiliating position of being too good for the woman they are chasing, while still somehow losing her admiration. Because good is not enough when it comes wrapped in insecurity. This is where discipline enters the picture. A man with discipline does not need to announce himself. His life announces him. He wakes up when he said he would. He trains when he does not feel like it. He keeps his word in small things, which is why he is trusted in big things. He is not a slave to his mood. He is not negotiating with his impulses every 10 minutes. He has delayed gratification, and that shows up in the way he carries himself. That kind of discipline creates a quiet confidence that does not beg for applause. David Goggins talks about this in the simplest possible language. You do not become strong by feeling strong. You become strong by doing the work when you do not feel like it. You become stable by proving to yourself that your feelings are not your ruler. That teaching matters here, because validation seeking is often a symptom of a man who has not built enough evidence in his own mind that he can stand alone. When you have repeated proof that you can keep promises to yourself, the need for outside approval drops. You do not need everyone to tell you that you are okay. You already know what you are made of because you have receipts, and that changes everything. There is a reason some men get more attractive as they get older, even if they do not become richer or more handsome in some dramatic way. They stop performing. They stop chasing. They stop making women the judge of their worth. They become more selective. They become harder to disturb. They stop acting like every interaction is a test they must pass. They begin to live from standards instead of hunger. That shift is magnetic, because men who are no longer starving for approval become safe to respect. And respect is the beginning of attraction that lasts. A lot of men never make this shift because they are addicted to the emotional rush of being chosen. They want the text back. They want the heart emoji. They want the "you're different." They want the moment she validates them so they can breathe again. But the problem with living like that is simple. The highs become addictive and the lows become unbearable. Your mood is no longer yours. Your emotional state is in someone else's hands. That is not masculinity. That is dependency. There was a man in his 30s who had built his entire dating life around being liked. Every profile picture was carefully engineered. Every message was polished. Every date was a performance. He was not asking, "Do I like this woman?" He was asking, "How do I make her approve of me?" And because he was always trying to win approval, he never screened properly. He ignored red flags. He tolerated disrespect. He stayed too long. He tried to be easy to love instead of solid enough to respect. Eventually, he realized he was not even choosing women. He was auditioning for them. That is what validation seeking does to a man's identity. It takes his agency away. And once a man loses agency, he starts negotiating with himself in weak ways. He lowers his standards just to keep connection. He explains away bad behavior. He becomes grateful for crumbs. He calls inconsistency chemistry. He calls anxiety passion. He calls confusion a connection. But what he is really experiencing is the internal cost of not standing on his own feet. You cannot build a strong bond with a woman while secretly asking her to hold your self-worth together. That is too much weight for any relationship to carry. One of the most useful things Robert Greene teaches in his books is that power dynamics are always visible in how people handle themselves under pressure. The person who reacts too quickly gives away leverage. The person who cannot tolerate silence gives away leverage. The person who needs a response now gives away leverage. The person who fears being disliked gives away leverage. And in the dating world, leverage is simply another way of saying presence. When your presence is solid, you do not have to chase respect. It arrives naturally. Now, let's talk about the consequences, because they are not small. A man who seeks validation too often becomes emotionally exhausted. He overthinks every interaction. He interprets delay as rejection. He becomes suspicious when things are calm. He is constantly checking his phone like it contains his identity. He stops being productive because he is emotionally preoccupied. His work suffers, his training suffers, his sleep suffers, his standards suffer, and then he wonders why his life feels smaller. The answer is because he has handed too much of his inner world to the approval of other people. This is where many men get trapped. They think validation seeking is a dating issue, but it becomes a life issue. The same habit that makes you cling to a woman also makes you weak in business. It makes you hesitate in meetings. It makes you accept disrespect from friends. It makes you say yes to things you should refuse. It makes you perform for family instead of living honestly. It makes you shapeshift so often that you lose track of who you actually are. That is a lonely way to live, and it is entirely avoidable. The man who stops seeking validation does not become cold. He becomes clear. He does not stop caring. He stops begging. He does not stop loving. He stops collapsing when love is not returned on his schedule. He does not stop pursuing excellence. He stops tying his peace to applause. That is the transformation. There is a reason Stoic writers keep coming back into this conversation. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Ryan Holiday, these are not just names people quote to sound wise. Their ideas matter because they speak to the central problem here. Control what is yours. Your thoughts, your habits, your conduct, your standards, your effort, your response. Everything else is borrowing trouble. A man who can live by that principle stops needing validation because he has replaced it with something stronger, self-governance. And self-governance is deeply attractive. Think of a real-world example. Cristiano Ronaldo. Whatever anyone thinks about him, nobody can deny the intensity of his self-discipline. He did not become a global icon by waiting for permission to believe in himself. He built a life around repeated standards, repeated work, repeated excellence. You may not like his personality, but you can understand the principle. Men who are governed by their own standards become unforgettable. Men who are governed by the crowd become disposable. That is not about being famous. That is about being rooted. And rooted men are not easy to manipulate. This is why the most confident men are not always the loudest. They are often the ones who do not panic when things are uncertain. They can sit in silence. They can be misunderstood without falling apart. They can leave a situation without making a scene. They can hear no without turning into a child. They can hear criticism without immediately defending their ego. They know their value is not invented in the moment by other people. It is forged over time. That kind of inner structure is what women respect. Not because women are mind readers, because human beings respect strength that does not need to announce itself. Now let's get practical, because theory without action is entertainment. A lot of men think the solution is to act detached, to play games, to pretend they do not care. That is not the answer. Fake detachment is just insecurity with sunglasses on. Real confidence is not manipulation. It is alignment. It is when what you believe about yourself matches how you live. It is when your actions tell the truth about your standards. If you say you will not tolerate disrespect, then you actually do not tolerate it. If you say your time matters, then your schedule reflects that. If you say fitness matters, then you train. If you say you want a serious relationship, then you stop entertaining chaos. If you say you want peace, then you stop feeding situations that create drama. The man who lives this way is no longer asking for approval. He is creating evidence. And evidence beats reassurance every time. Subscribe now if this message is landing with you, because the rest of this will cut even deeper, and I want you here for it. Here is another hidden cause of lost respect: inconsistency. Most men do not realize how much respect they lose every time they do not match their own words. You promise and cancel. You set a boundary and fold. You say you are busy and then act available. You say you are focused and then get distracted by every emotional disturbance. Each inconsistency is small, but over time, it teaches people not to take you seriously. Women notice consistency more than most men think. They may not say it in those words, but they feel it. A consistent man feels safe. Not safe like boring, but safe like dependable. He is emotionally stable. His word means something. His moods do not run the house. He is not trying to win every conversation. He is not turning every disagreement into a crisis. He is not feeding on drama to feel alive. That kind of man does not have to force respect because his behavior already carries it. And when he speaks, people listen. Here is the painful pattern. A man loses respect in one area and then starts overcompensating in another. He gets weak in dating and becomes louder at work. He feels invisible socially and then buys something expensive to prove himself. He feels rejected by one woman and becomes arrogant with the next one. None of it works because the issue was never external. The issue was internal fragmentation. A fragmented man is easy to confuse because he does not know what he stands for when the mood changes. That is why validation seeking can be so destructive. It fragments identity. One woman's approval makes you feel powerful. One woman's silence makes you feel worthless. One good day makes you arrogant. One bad day makes you collapse. You are not living from principle. You are living from weather. And weather changes. So what do? You become a man who trains himself to act on values instead of emotions. You do not wait to feel confident. You practice competence until confidence becomes the byproduct. You do not wait to feel worthy. You live in a way that earns self-respect. You do not wait for women to rebuild your identity. You build it yourself. That means lifting weights when nobody is watching. That means getting your money in order. That means cutting off habits that weaken you. That means reducing porn, reducing doom scrolling, reducing late-night self-pity, reducing the stuff that makes you passive. A weak dopamine system creates a weak man because he can no longer tolerate discomfort long enough to build anything meaningful. This is why discipline matters so much in this conversation. A man who cannot govern his urges will eventually seek validation just to regulate his emotions. He will use attention as a drug. He will use women as mirrors. He will use relationships to avoid facing himself. That path never ends well. The men who change are the men who get honest. They stop saying, "Why did she stop respecting me?" and start asking, "What in my behavior trained her not to?" That question is uncomfortable, but it is powerful. Maybe you became too available. Maybe you became too reactive. Maybe you stopped leading yourself. Maybe you tolerated behavior that should have ended things. Maybe you confused emotional access with respect. Maybe you kept proving your value to someone who had already stopped seeing it because you were no longer seeing it in yourself. This is where men can transform fast, because once the truth is clear, the next move is clear too. You stop chasing. You start restoring standards. You stop explaining every feeling. You start living with direction. You stop making her the center of the story. You become the center of your own life again. And when that happens, your tone changes. Your eye contact changes. Your posture changes. Your presence changes. Not because you are pretending to be alpha or copying some internet persona, but because your internal position is different. You are no longer asking the world to tell you who you are. That shift is felt immediately. A real example: a man loses a relationship because he was overly available and constantly seeking reassurance. At first, he thinks the solution is to win her back with more effort, more texts, more gifts, more apologies. But the real turnaround comes months later when he stops obsessing, gets serious about his training, wakes up earlier, rebuilds his finances, reconnects with his purpose, and learns how to sit quietly without needing a reply. Then, if she ever sees him again, she does not see the same man. She sees a man who is not trying to be chosen. He is already choosing his life. That difference is everything. Ryan Holiday often emphasizes that the ego craves recognition, but real power comes from competence and calm. That idea is especially important here. When a man is addicted to being seen, he becomes performative. When he is committed to being effective, he becomes grounded. Performance is fragile. Effectiveness is durable. Women may flirt with performance, but they respect durability. The same thing is true in friendships. The same thing is true in business. The same thing is true in family. People are drawn to a man who is solid because solidity is rare. Everybody can be loud. Everybody can be emotional. Everybody can post something. Very few men can remain centered. And centered men are not begging to be liked. They are busy becoming formidable. Now let's talk about the other side of this, because some men swing too far. They hear "stop seeking validation" and become emotionally dead. That is not the answer either. A strong man is not a stone. He feels. He cares. He can be tender, affectionate, expressive, and loving. The difference is he does not hand his stability to someone else. That is the line. You can love a woman deeply and still not need her to reassure you every hour. You can appreciate compliments without depending on them. You can be attracted to someone without worshiping her response. You can ask for what you need without begging. You can walk away without hatred. You can hold standards without cruelty. That balance is maturity, and maturity is attractive. When a man matures, his relationships improve because he stops using women to solve problems he should solve himself. He stops expecting a girlfriend to heal his loneliness, fix his insecurity, give his life meaning, and make him feel enough. That is too much for any person to carry. It is not romantic. It is pressure. Instead, he becomes a man who brings peace into the relationship because he already knows how to make peace with himself. That is rare, and rarity matters. Another reason respect declines is because men confuse access with value. Just because she has access to you does not mean she respects you more. Just because she sees you often does not mean she is more attracted. Just because she knows you are available does not mean she is impressed. In fact, overavailability can reduce value very quickly if it is not balanced by standards and purpose. This does not mean playing hot and cold. It means being a man whose life is full enough that nobody gets your attention by default. That is what women respect. Not games, but rootedness. A man with a mission is easier to love than a man with no direction because he gives the relationship shape. He is not floating. He is not waiting. He is moving. And when a man is moving with purpose, a woman can feel that she is dealing with a real man, not a nervous follower. This is why men who become better with age usually stop asking, "How do I get her to respect me?" and start asking, "How do I become a man I respect?" That is the real question, because self-respect precedes external respect, not the other way around. You want the simple test. Look at how you treat yourself when nobody is watching. Do you keep promises to yourself? Do you control your impulses? Do you protect your time? Do you speak honestly? Do you maintain your body? Do you manage your money? Do you let rejection decide your day? Do you collapse when one person is distant? Do you chase validation like air? Your answers tell you more than any woman ever could. And if you do not like the answers, good. That means you are awake. Awareness is the beginning of change. Subscribe right now if you know this is the kind of truth you needed, because in a moment I am going to tie everything together in a way that should change how you live from this day forward. One of the most dangerous lies men believe is that respect is mainly about attractiveness, status, or charm. Those things matter, but they are not the foundation. The foundation is whether your behavior signals strength, honesty, and self-command. A beautiful man who is needy still loses respect. A wealthy man who is insecure still loses respect. A charming man who cannot hold boundaries still loses respect. Attraction may open a door, but respect determines whether the room stays warm. That is why men who focus only on getting chosen end up disappointed. They never learn how to be the kind of man who naturally draws and keeps respect. They chase reactions instead of building character. And character is what survives time. Think about men like David Goggins, or even military leaders, top athletes, elite craftsmen, builders, founders. They are not respected because everyone agrees with them. They are respected because they have internal standards that do not fluctuate every time someone has an opinion. That does not mean they are perfect. It means they are anchored. Anchored men can weather rejection without losing themselves. They can be alone without panicking. They can be desired without becoming arrogant. They can be criticized without becoming broken. That is power. That is why seeking validation is such a trap. It trains you to become emotionally outsourced. And the more outsourced your identity becomes, the less respect you will feel from others. Because respect is most naturally extended to men who already stand on something solid. So here is the transformation. Stop asking, "How do I make her respect me?" Start asking, "What habits in me are eroding respect?" Stop asking, "How do I get her attention?" Start asking, "Why is my life not compelling enough that I do not need to beg for attention?" Stop asking, "What should I text so she does not lose interest?" Start asking, "Why is my emotional state so fragile that a delay in response can ruin my day?" Stop asking, "How do I prove I am enough?" Start building a life that makes the question irrelevant. Because the day you stop seeking validation is the day you begin becoming dangerous in the best possible way. Not dangerous to women, dangerous to weakness, dangerous to passivity, dangerous to self-deception, dangerous to every habit that used to keep you small. That is when your posture changes. That is when your voice changes. That is when your relationships change. That is when women start sensing that the man they are dealing with is not there to be rescued or reassured. He is there to build, to lead, to love, and to live. And if a woman respects that, she stays warmer. If she does not, you do not collapse. You do not chase. You do not negotiate your dignity. You move accordingly. That is freedom. That is masculinity in a healthy form. That is what most men never learn because they are too busy trying to be liked to become respected. Do not be that man anymore, because the truth is, she did not stop respecting you all at once. It happened in tiny moments, when you folded, when you over-explained, when you apologized to keep the peace instead of speaking the truth, when you acted like her mood controlled your day, when you treated her response like a verdict on your worth, when you chose approval over integrity. But the good news is respect can be rebuilt the same way it was lost. In tiny moments, when you keep your word, when you tell the truth, when you hold your standards, when you stop chasing, when you train, when you work, when you stay calm, when you refuse to hand over your identity, when you become the kind of man who can stand alone without feeling alone. That is where real confidence lives. Not in the applause, not in the text back, not in the compliments, in the quiet certainty that you are enough because you have become someone you respect. And once you have that, everything changes. If this hit you in the chest, take it seriously. Subscribe now, because this channel is for men who are done living weak, done chasing approval, and done waiting for somebody else to hand them a life. Start today. Stand up straighter. Speak less, mean more. Keep your promises. Build your body. Build your money. Build your mind. Stop asking for permission to be a man, because when you stop seeking validation, you do not become less lovable. You become harder to disrespect. And that is the beginning of everything.